All right, well, welcome everybody. My name's Stacy Brennan. I'm the Curator of Education for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. We appreciate you joining us today for our LUAG at Lunch series. This is a student-led series that features informal discussions and insights around works of art from the Lehigh University Art Gallery collection. Today, we're joined by Hallie Wilson, who's going to talk about Bill Owen's work, a photographer who published a book called Suburbia. And Hallie is going to talk to us about the use of photography as a form of documentation of events or experiences, rather than necessarily thinking about a planned work of art. We're looking forward to this discussion, and thanks so much for joining us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hallie.
Hi guys, how's everyone doing? So, use of photography as documentation by me. So just a little splurge about me. My name's Hallie Wilson. I'm a sophomore this year at Lehigh University. I'm double majoring in art and art history with a minor in museum studies. And I'm also on the women's swimming and diving here. So, and that's my dog, Lily. So I'll be speaking a little bit about the LUAG's current exhibit, Doing Democracy. I'm sure y'all have seen it. It's on the Greenway. So, but specifically about this piece by Bill Owens titled Children's Birthday Party, Janet Owens, Pleasanton, California. A little background information on Owens. He was born in 1938 and he's currently 82 and he studied at San Francisco State University and California State University. This photograph is from a series titled Suburbia. When asked about the series, Owen said, "This book is about my friends and the world I live in. In the fall of 1968, I began working as a photographer for the Livermore Independent. My daily routine took me into the homes of hundreds of families and into contact with social life of 3 communities." What Owens captured was real. It wasn't staged photographs or stiff family portraits. They were pure in the moment photographs. You can see here in Birthday Party the pure joy on all these kids' faces from the party itself. So here are a few other examples from the series itself. On the left is a woman watering plants in a toilet. And on the right is their second annual 4th of July block party. And then on the left here is it's a Tupperware party, which these women got together and just talked and was excited about the new Tupperware they got to preserve their food. And on the right is Owen's wife and 2 kids laying down 6 feet rolls of grass. He was really excited about how the next day he'd just boom, have a yard. So, however, this next photograph is what started it all. He was leaving a friend's house and he saw this, his neighbor's kid in cowboy boots riding a big wheel and holding a plastic rifle. Owen said, "The body language is just right. And I didn't pose him. I just said, 'Richie,' bang, took the picture and you're done." So I think it's really important that to realize that photography doesn't have to be a professional portrait or aesthetic picture frames or anything, that it can be used as a form of documentation to capture moments from your life. Particularly an example is I try to say I'm a photographer. I quite literally have no idea what I'm doing. I have a camera and I just take pictures when I think something looks cool. So here are a few of my pictures as well. Oh, this is my dog. I was literally just on a hike and my dog was running towards me and I had my camera. I just took a bunch of pictures and I have this really funny photo of her. It's just, I try and take my camera wherever I go, whenever there's an event or something like we're all going to my aunt's house or we're going hiking or something like that. I just always have it with me. And it's more so of kind of like a digital journal where I can have these visual documentation of things that have happened to me, things that have happened in my life. The biggest thing for me is I really like when I can look back through. I have thousands and thousands of photos. But when I look back through, there's always something that triggers a memory that I had forgotten. It's like, oh, right, that happened and this happened because of that. And it's like, oh, that's so funny, you know? This was a really good example. I just built this really cool fire. As you can see, it's enormous. And the wind blew just the right way. And I ended up getting this photograph of the fire and it looks like a horse coming out of it, which is just the randomest thing, but it's just, you wouldn't have gotten that unless you just were snapping at the photo. And this last one is I'm an intern here for the LUAG, and I'm photo and video documenting all of the outdoor sculpture. And it was fall and I was walking around campus and I just thought that the leaves looked really pretty. I took a picture of this tree and it's my favorite photograph I think I've ever taken. It's currently the background of my computer as well. So that's really it. That was a bit faster than I had meant it to be. Basically it's just, I think that photography is a really important art form, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be seen as that way. Whereas people tend to think that to be a photographer, you have to have all these skills, you have to know all the technicalities of a camera, when half the time I'm here taking pictures through auto mode, which a really high-end photographer would tell me that I'm not a photographer, which technically speaking, I'm not. I'm just someone behind the camera, which is, so I really like the fact that the idea that anyone can be a photographer in reality. You know, you could start with your phone if it's something you're really into, pick up a camera, but I just like the idea that it doesn't have to be this artistic art form, that it can just be you with your friends and you're taking some funny photos of you all together and it's a memory keepsake for you. I'm really into journaling. And so I really liked Owen's work of just how I figured it's just crazy of how he was doing kind of exactly what I'm doing now, of where he just decided, you know, if there's something that interests him, he's just going to take a photo of it instead of, you know, having to plan out all these things. He had just started this job, and he was talking about how in Suburbia and in suburbs, there's not a lot to take photos of. You know, there's not like these really pretty aesthetic places. And he was talking about after he took this photo of Richie, he just thought, you know, well, hey, like, why can't I just take photos? You know, why does there have to be this outline of, you know, this, and this, of these are the rules that you have to follow to have a good aesthetic piece of art, instead of just this hilarious photo of a kid with a rifle. So that's really what I was just wanted to get about, what I wanted to share with you guys of his process and how I found that I'm actually really similar to it. If anyone has any questions or wants to have a little discussion about it, I'm open to that.
Well,
You can also use the chat box if you don't want to unmute.
I was going to say, you do have a question in the chat box.
Oh, I do. Sorry.
From Gary. He's curious if you use a real camera or a phone, or perhaps both.
So when I started out with a phone because I didn't have a camera. I just love taking photos of my friends. I really like remembering things. So whenever something like funny was going to happen, or someone was just like doing something silly, I'd immediately have my phone with me and I was like taking pictures. I actually ended up, my old phone that I had, I didn't have a lot of storage on it. And I ended up deleting every single app I had on my phone just so that I could keep all of the photos that were on it, which was just crazy to me. And then I would borrow my mother's camera every once in a while, but she has this super Mac Daddy, like crazy camera, and would just be really nervous about me taking it places. And then on my 16th birthday, I got a Nikon D3400 camera, which is, it has photo and video qualities to it, which is really nice because recently I've gotten into videography as well, which is a whole nother ball game, but it's really, really exciting, especially if there's events going on. You can have videos instead of photos, and you can stitch them all together. That was something that going off on a little bit, my mom and I started doing, where she kind of does photos, I'm kind of doing videos. Whereas if anything happens, for example, when we did it for my brother's graduation, we did it for when we brought Lily home over quarantine, when we brought her home for the first like 2 days, my mom was there taking all these photos of us all with her, hanging out with her running around. And then I was taking videos, and I ended up doing this whole little video montage of her first couple of days with us, which was just a great memory to have, of instead of the still frames, it was nice to see her actually running around. So that was pretty cool.
Does anyone have any questions for Hallie, perhaps about Bill Owens or her own work? Actually, I'll start off with one. We were chatting before you began, and you also said it in your presentation. You said, I'm not necessarily a photographer because I don't use the fancy settings, or you use it in auto mode. What do you think defines what a photographer is? Why would you consider yourself not one when you are kind of capturing, in essence, similar work to what Bill Owens is doing? What makes him different from you?
So I consider myself, yes, I kind of am. Like, technically speaking, yes, I'm a person behind a camera. That means you're a photographer. But there's difference between, I believe there's difference between just, completely winging it and having this extreme experience behind, taking portraits of people, taking like landscapes, also doing this, documentation kind of method. I haven't technically had a whole lot of experience. The only real portraits I've ever taken would have been of my cousin when she wanted some grad photos. But for the most part, it's really just me, just more of like photojournalism kind of. It's like I really like to journal, I write a lot, but instead this is kind of the visual aspect of that. Instead of technically, like, I'm not really doing it necessarily as an art form or to display them or to really share them with other people. It's more just like personally to me. So technically speaking, I am a photographer, yes, but I don't really throw that term around a lot, I guess, because I'm not super experienced, I guess. I wouldn't necessarily, when most people think photographer, they think, National Geographic or like wedding photography or something along those lines, and it's not really what I do. So I don't necessarily use that term necessarily.
I think that's like so funny that you said that, because the last lunch series that I participated in, we were talking about unintentional art and kind of what makes art. And just the point that really stuck with me was it doesn't really have to be based off of intention like I had previously thought. It could just be more so just capturing the moment, or just all within the feelings that you have or the feelings that it invokes in others, and just the interpretation, um just that people bring to it, or that you bring to it in your art or in your pictures, your documentation. um you obviously connect experiences with it. You obviously have emotions being invoked when you go back and you're looking at it. So I don't know. I just think it's funny that you place such an emphasis on not having that experience. Just because I don't know, just the pictures that you've shown to me, that's better than anything that I would ever take. I'm horrible at taking pictures.
That was the whole point of this discussion, of saying that anyone can do this. I'm genuinely telling you, I have no idea what I'm doing. I saw that tree and I thought it looked cool and I took a picture of it. That's what I'm saying, of that literally anyone can do this, right? And then that was kind of bumped up in Photoshop a little bit. I upped the yellow contrast so that, I up the yellow contrast a little bit so that it looked a little more vibrant. But other than that, I literally was walking across, like down through center campus. I was like, oh, that's a cool tree. And I took a picture of it. That's what I'm saying, is that literally anyone can be a photographer if you have a good eye for something, or literally if you don't, because you're going to learn. You're going to learn of, oh, this looks a little better if it's in the center, or if it's kind of, if there's more sky in the photo. You learn those things just from looking at your own photography, and you're like, oh, okay, this looks a little better like this. This looks a little better like this. Or then, but you also have the whole photo documentation side of it, of just, oh, these are some really funny pictures of my friends that I'm really glad I was able to capture, because then we can all look back at them together and remember these hilarious times we had around this bonfire. So
I think what you said there about developing an eye too is really important, both for appreciating works of art, but also, you know, participating and creating your own. It's more just learning how to notice the world around you, right? So that you can capture those moments through photographs. Richard had a question for you. How much editing do you do after you take a photo? What's your editing process?
it depends. So I try and do very minimal editing, just because I like the photo for the raw quality that it is. If it's something that is usually just of friends or family or some memory that I had, that then I don't particularly edit them ever. If it's something more so along the lines, for example, this picture of my dog, I didn't edit it at all. Just, oh, actually I did. There's a picture, there's my brother was standing in the background. I don't know if you can see, it's slightly, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but it's slightly just a little bit wiggly right here in the trees. Of to the left, right to your ear is where he was standing. And so I edited him out of that just because I thought it would look better of just the focal point of her instead of his butt in the background. So there's things like that. I'll edit people out or something, but I usually don't mess with colors necessarily unless I want them to just be a bit more brighter. Whereas these photos, I didn't edit at all just because the contrast was amazing. And then these I edited where I upped the contrast a bit, and I increased the saturation for yellow and orange and within the photos, and actually backed off the green a bit, just because to make the yellow pop a bit more. But that's just a personal preference. I try and like I said, I try to limit how much I edit photos just so that it is as natural as possible. I really like the raw quality of photos of, you know, that's actually what it looks like instead of like it being a completely different color. So I do edit them, just not as much, I guess.
We were talking earlier about traditional photography and, you know, creating photographs or printing photographs in the darkroom. What do you think, now that you were talking about the editing process, what do you think it was like for Bill Owens? I think the editing process looked much different, right? And
Yes.
also just the idea of digital versus traditional, where photographers really, they had to make choices about which photographs they were going to take, because it cost money to print them, or time and effort to develop them in the darkroom. So what do you think might change the dynamic in photography from the traditional to the digital?
That's actually a really interesting point you brought up. He actually stopped photographing after Suburbia with the film. He actually got frustrated with it, with not being able to edit or change photos a lot. And then after the second publication of Suburbia, it was a couple years later when digital photography had come out. He actually like picked it back up, and he started using it again and got back into photography, because he also has like a brewery company in California, which is random, but I think it's really funny. But so I just think, I don't know, it's really interesting between, I've never done film photography myself. It's something that I do really want to get into at some point, just because I am, a little spiel really quick. I did this whole portfolio my senior year of high school called Technology People, where I took pieces of technology and created small clay people inside. Whereas for example, I had a printer and the sides were glass and they were painting the pages as the printer printed the photograph out. So I could show those at the end somewhere. They're probably on my computer. But it's just something that I thought was really interesting to me of, keeping these old techniques alive, of not letting technology completely take over, which is, it's amazing to have these, but, I love my Polaroid. It's a more updated version of what Polaroids used to be, but it's really cool to have those old art forms still alive today. And so it's something that I also really want to get into, which Owens didn't particularly like it, but maybe I will.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that he switched to digital photography. It's really interesting. And, I think it's also just, we have about 20 works of his in our collection, and they're all kind of those immediate snapshots of kind of events that he was part of, that kind of photojournalism piece. And they're all very different. So if there are participants here interested, you can view them on our website at luag.org. So what are some kind of closing thoughts or additional questions that people have here that are on the conversation?
One thing I would say is I was always very hesitant on taking pictures just because of the fact that I felt I'm not good at taking pictures. And I look at everything, I feel like, as an intentional art form. And that's one area that I felt I could never get into. And I like to journal and I like to write. And in a lot of moments, I can't just sit down and write down what's going on, write down what I'm thinking, just because I don't want to forget it. And I don't know, I'm kind of gonna try to start for like documenting using pictures and kind of seeing where that gets me, because I don't know, I'm sold.
I'm so glad. That makes me happy. That's literally the whole point of this, is what I really wanted to encourage everyone, that this is something that you should definitely try. I super really enjoy it. It's being able to look back and just have that, the whole thing, a picture has 1,000 words, of where I could write all about what happened, or I could just simply show you with these photos, and then it's going to trigger that memory of what happened for me. Whereas, I'm always going to remember the process it took to take these photos, or I could tell you word for word how Lily was running up and down this dam like an absolute mannequin, and just like was barreling towards me. So I just like laid down on the ground really quick and started snapping photos and got all these funny pictures of her running towards me. So, it's just, I really love it as a form of photojournalism. And so please.
Hey, Hallie, this is Gary. Just two questions. First, what you're talking about, I mean, do you have your grandparents must have taken pictures, snapshots, family snapshots, right? Chronicling the events of things that have gone in the family. Is that something that your family has shared with you? I mean, he's been doing it since Easton Kodak, published the Brownie.
We do. My whole family has really, my grandmother, she's really into our history and everything.
Yeah.
So she has I don't know if everyone knows what a family Bible is, but it's something that we've had in our family for generations. And it's what, I forgot specifically what date they were really popular in, but you would keep basically a catalog of everyone in your family.
Yeah, sure.
Right, you would have photographs of them, and you would have, their dates and births, and when someone would like leave the country or go somewhere else. It was really crazy. So we have something like that, which is really interesting to me, to be able to see the photographs of my greats,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
really
sure.
crazy. And we have my grandma just loved to document when my mother and her siblings were growing up as well. So they have albums and albums of baby photos and trips that they took and everything. So I guess maybe that's kind of rubbed off on me, of her rubbing off on my mother rubbing off on me. I mean, obviously the camera my grandma used is much different than the one I use today, but
the
yeah, I
effect is
actually
the
never thought
same.
about
The
it.
effect is the same, right? It's literally snapshots of your family as they moved on. The other question I had for you, so moving from film to digital, right? There's a purpose for this of having 24 pictures on a roll of film. You don't waste it. Digital, it's almost opposite that. Do you go through the process? This is a picture of your dog we're looking at. Were there 15 other pictures that didn't make it? What did you do? Did you throw them out, or can you not? Can you bring yourself to call to toss them?
What's super crazy is I actually tend to shoot in sports mode,
Yeah.
actually, which is because I can hold it down and it can take like 5 or 10 photos in a second and just go
Yeah.
super crazy, super fast. And I guess that's something I would have to switch in my mindset to if I were to get back into if I were to get into film photography, whereas I wouldn't be able to do that. Whereas I guess that was probably pretty interesting for Owens in his time, because things were always staged and presented very nicely, because you had to plan it out, because you didn't have that many shots to take, really. You
Right. They call it the decisive moment, right?
Right. So it was
no reason to give up what you're doing, because it's the technology that you have. It's an opportunity that he didn't have. You definitely have to look at things a little differently. But that's interesting. But you do throw them out.
I typically do. I mean, I have all of them that I took of her. I have a very big, I recommend to anyone, if you are going to get into photography, do not put things on flash drives. You'll regret it after you get through your 3rd flash drive. You get an external drive and just keep everything on there, because it's so much easier. So I have almost every photo I've ever taken there, unless it was just absolute like super blurry or crappy or something I never use, and I throw it out. But I still have all of the photos that I took of Lily from this day. I just have this one particularly as my favorite.
Right. Okay. I'm curious, because I find that I do the same thing. And if we go through there, or maybe, so I've been into photography for 50 years, right? Started when I was a kid. And I've been a pretty terrible photographer, but I have all, 70,000 pictures someplace. I hate to throw them out, but there's, of all of them, right, we have a couple of what we call keepers, right? There are a handful that we put on the wall, a handful that we actually put into an album. But for some reason, I can't delete even the terrible ones or the repeats,
Me too.
I completely understand.
I have them all too. And I guess that's something to think about as the switch from digital, the editing process. You said you don't edit too much, but selecting the photograph is part of the editing process. So, making sure that you have the one photo that represents what you were going for, or that you just feel like represents that moment the best. Well, any last closing thoughts, Hallie, as we end our time here?
I know I started off talking about an artist, and then I ended up more on my work, but I just really want to, if you take anything out of this presentation, it's just to please give photography a try. It's really not as hard as people seem it to think it is, because people always see these really super intimidating photos of these artsy girl in a flower with a flowy dress. Like, you can take a photo of whatever interests you, because it interests you, and that's all that matters. So I just really encourage everyone to go take some photos today if you can.
Well, it's a beautiful day to do that. It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend. And as we head into the holidays, it's a great conversation to have about capturing the moments that are important to us, especially now, given that we can't always be together. So thank you for this inspiring conversation, Hallie. I hope that everyone who's here today will join us for future discussions. We have a couple coming up on the 3rd and 4th of December, and then we will resume again in February. So thank you all for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Please look at our website if you're interested in learning more about Bill Owens or seeing his work. And that's about it. So join us for future programs. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Hallie. Thank you, everyone.